Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
And good morning to you, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and translators galore. It is the Michael Dukes Show, and we are diving into it today. We got a full boat, and thankfully, Robb Myers is a little bit more in the uptake than I was yesterday because I had... you know, when you when you book a guest and then you forget to put it on the big calendar, you know how that works? You know what I mean? You're like, oh yeah, I got that. And then you take another phone call because, you know, your life is hectic and you forget to put it on the calendar. And then you tell everybody, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. And then you realize, wait a second, why is Rob texting me? Oh, that's right, because we're talking tomorrow. Anyway, Robb Myers is joining us this morning, Senator from the Interior. We're going to be talking with him about the latest and greatest in the legislature, as well as his latest article on the Alaska story, which is a continuation of his series where he talks about, I don't know what he's calling this series, but it's basically, you know, kind of a running commentary on the history of the state, how we got here, where we're going from here, and how do we fix it. Anyway, we're going to talk with him about that here in just a minute. In hour two of the big radio program, we're going to talk with Ben Carpenter, who's kind of become a weekly guest to come in and talk about the things that he's covering on his new show. It's a daily YouTube show, 7 p.m. every night, almost every night, I guess. And it's called Oversight Live, and he does commentary and discussion and behind the scenes stuff. Gives you a perspective as a former legislator where he's got a little bit of insight into how the sausage is made. He's going to come in hour two, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the latest news on the LNG pipeline. Is it really a thing? I mean, is it a thing, or is it just more of, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is it just more hopium? Hopium. That's what I'm looking for. 100% hopium. I hope that it's going to work. Anyway, we're going to jump into that here in hour two as well. But first, let's get down to brass tacks here and start chatting with our good friend, State Senator Robb Myers, who again comes in every morning to, or comes in now and then to fill us in on what's happening out there. Good morning, Rob. How you doing, my friend?
Oh boy, you know, the 6 o'clock club's a lot easier when you're just listening instead of actually participating.
I know. And Rob actually beat me into the green room this morning. I was like, boy, he's like the early bird gets the worm. What the heck, man? It must be that insomnia. Can't sleep down there in Juneau, huh?
Well, you know, it's a little bit of, oh shoot, I don't want to oversleep and miss my 6 a.m. meeting with Michael, and a little bit of, well, I better log into the computer and make sure this darn thing's actually working if we're going to talk on here. So a little bit of both.
I feel you for sure. There are those days when it's that day when you flick it on and you go, wait, nothing happened. What do I do now? So for sure, a little panic ensued. Well, Rob, you know, I want to talk a little bit about this your latest article, which I'm sure is not winning you any friends or influencing any people down there in Juneau, because you kind of call it out, man. You kind of call the headline of the article. And before we get into the specifics of this article, I want to talk about the series too. But he says, why do so many Republican legislators support higher spending? That's the name of the article. I mean, wow, Rob. I mean, you must be sitting at the lonely table during lunch down there. Is all I'm saying. What, what's the reaction that you've gotten so far? I mean, is anybody giving you the wink and the nod, or are they all just? I mean, what's kind of the reaction inside the fishbowl of Juneau down there to your series here?
Well, surprisingly, I've actually gotten very little reaction, which I'm not sure if that means they're not reading it or if they're just that mad at me and they're not bringing it up. Both are possibilities at this point. So I'm getting some good feedback, out across, Facebook and from, people contacting me about it and stuff. But yeah, so far down in Juneau, people aren't really mentioning it much. And I think maybe that's because I'm taking a little bit of a different approach with it. I'm not really mentioning a whole lot of recent stuff because
right.
Part of the reason I'm doing these articles is because we've been talking about these same issues for the last decade-ish or so around here. I know you've been talking about it longer, but the thing is that, we planted the seeds for all these things back in the 70s for the most part.
Right.
Some of it's the 80s, but I'm trying to tell people, it's like, look, things don't change because we've changed out legislators, because we've got a system that's busted. We've got a system that set up some incentives. And until we modify those incentives, it's not going to matter a whole lot who you send down here, because they're all going to want to do the same thing again anyway. So I think that's part of the reason that the reaction's been a little muted, is because, as opposed to, let's just say, some other folks that have been in this building, I'm not going after anybody specific here. I'm talking about the system. I'm talking about things that have been, running this state in effect for 50-ish years.
Right. You're talking about systemic things rather than individual actions. You're talking about systemic problems. And I definitely want to get down into this, but tell me about, what led you to write this whole series? I mean, give me the genesis of the series. And do you have do you call it, are we calling it the Myers cycle? What are we calling this series here? What are we calling this?
Well, I when I was starting to put this stuff together, I was starting to gin this up around October or so last year. And, initially I was just thinking, this is a bunch of why questions, because we know what the problems are. I think most of us recognize that. And to some extent, we understand the how of this works. But I kept having the same questions pop up again and again and again, either in personal conversations or with people that, commenting on Facebook or something like this, on things that I'm saying or doing. And it's like, there's so much going on here, guys, that is in the background. That's the foundation of what our problems are. Not so much, obviously what we see here with specific individuals or, certain things in the budget or something along these lines. It's a much deeper thing. And, I was doing some reading about some national economic history over the interim, just because I'm strange and I find that interesting. And I was thinking, well, some of this, we need to write some of this down about Alaska, because the why of how we got into this mess is not very well explained. People keep coming back and saying, well, just cut the budget. And I'm like, there's reasons that we have not been able to cut the budget. And it's not the math. It's not necessarily the management. That's some of it. There are incentives baked into the system that prevent us from doing that. There's a reason that 2019, when the governor did try to start cutting the budget, that it really, that he faced so much pushback. The last time that we actually had, meaningful budget cuts around here was 1986, when we ran out of money. When we were running strictly on oil prices and the Saudis drove oil prices down, and there was a 10% budget cut across the board. And, right. And the reasons we had to do that were very simple. Number one, we had run up the spending to unsustainable levels. And number two, oil was the only game in town. There were no other funds yet at that point for us to go raid, which is what we're doing now, going out and raiding these other funds, whether it started with the SBR and the CBR and then the permanent fund. And now we're going after, some of these other little pockets of money. So I don't know, so I wanted to, let people understand, hey, we've got much deeper issues here than just, certain people in certain spots don't want to cut the budget. Certain people in certain spots, would prefer to go after the PFD rather than fixing the problems underneath of that. So, I wanted to let folks know, hey, we're dealing with much bigger issues here. And until we fix those systemic problems, I don't care who you elect and send down here to Juneau. We're going to end up in this same spot.
Yeah. And I think, I often say that, we focus too long. I think this is my philosophy or my thought on theory on this. We focus too long on the cuts only approach because as I've often said, there's no political will to get that done. And what you're looking at is, why is there no political will? What is the what is the underpinnings of why they don't feel incentivized to cut the budget? And it's interesting what you're saying, going back to the mid 80s where we had the bottom drop out on oil and it was the only game in town. That was all that was propping up that was only 6 years after they'd eliminated the income tax in the state of Alaska. And all of a sudden they were getting a crash course on what happens when you have a solo income stream or revenue stream or tax stream to fund a government. All of a sudden, especially when you realize how volatile a single source commodity is like oil, it was kind of the real wake-up call. And I think you've done a good job so far of kind of laying the underpinnings of how we got to this point. But this really, to me, was one of the most eye-opening of your series so far, because it really talked about, the makeup of the legislature, who it was, and why we've now created this incentive to continue the spend regardless. Why we've stopped, in 1986, it would have been unthinkable for the legislature or for the governor to tap into the permanent fund, to veto half of the permanent fund dividend, and then to take that money and immediately spend it on government. That would have been political suicide. It was already tough enough for Sheffield and company at that point anyway, but it was, it would have been political suicide, but somehow it became more palatable later on. And again, you can lay a lot of that at the feet of the vast majority of Republicans who refused to attempt to override the governor. Walker they could have held an override vote on Walker, but they chose not to. And part of that, again, going back to Peter Machicki's comments on my program at that point, when I asked him why they didn't put it to a vote of the people, and he said, well, because people would vote with their wallets. Well, yes, they normally do. In this case, it would have just been a little more blatant. And so I think it's an interesting discussion as well. But I want to get in specifically. You can walk us through this article. We're going to get started on this here in just a moment, but we're up against the break. So let's get started here. We'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Robb Myers is our guest. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio will return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. We are in the break right now. Robb Myers is our guest. Kevin says, we have met the enemy and he is us. He's not wrong. He's not wrong on this.
Yeah, that is 100% correct. That's a large part of why I wanted to do this series, is because I wanted to let everybody know it's like, this is not strictly the politician's fault. we're the ones that not necessarily keep putting the same people back, but the same type of people. We keep, we get different people, but we end up with the same results. I was going back and double checking. I know you and I like to talk about this issue a lot. Is since 2016, we've changed out 75% of the legislature, and we're still getting the same results. 75% of us have changed out, and yet we're still getting approximately the same results out of this. That tells me that it's not necessarily individual legislators or
Right.
or politicians as a whole that's the problem. If people are voting out or people are retiring, people with a certain view, and the ones replacing them have the same view, we got a bigger problem than just who's in office right now.
Well, and I would like to make the counter argument.
Okay.
I agree with you. I think part of it is that we're sending kind of the same type of people back, but also it's that center nugget of legislators who have been there for, since Christ was a corporal. They've been there forever. They are the movers and shakers. They've got all the institutional knowledge. And it's like that one little speck of mold in the petri dish that just, it doesn't matter how much new medium you dop into the dish, it just kind of corrupts. And it's the pod people, man, right? They send them down there, and the ones that are in charge, the people who have been in Senate finance or House finance for years, they've been in the leadership position for years. I mean, the legislators down there have been down there for 30 years. There's a lot of them down there that are approaching the 30-year mark or more. And they stayed, but it was all these new ones. And then when they got the new ones down there, it's like they pod peopled them up, Broad. I'm just, I think, yes, you're right. Some of it is kind of the attitude, but also I think it doesn't help when you can't change out. You need a clean slate is what you need. You need a clean slate overall.
No, I understand your point, and to some extent I agree with it. But politics is a numbers game. It always is. And so that core group of, let's say, I don't know, maybe 4 senators and, 6 or 8 people over on the House side, give or take. I'm sure we could argue a little bit about membership there, but, in order to keep that core group in charge, you still have to have enough, to use the English term, backbenchers that are willing to support them, willing to vote them into those roles. And for that to happen, again, you have to get folks down here that have that same mindset. You don't necessarily come down here and, I'm going to vote for this guy because he's always been there. I'm going to vote for this guy to be in this role because I'm okay with him. I'm okay with his approach. So, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, that's how it went for, the first, 4 or 6 years, but we're 10 years on. We're 3/4 of the legislature changed out. We're kind of past that situation.
Well, and in fairness, you're an example of what you're talking about versus what I'm talking about. You went down there and you didn't get caught up in the support the old guy, situation. You came down there with a mind of your own, and that's you're right on that. That's exactly. Chris says it here. If the ones that are in charge are the problem, then why do the rank and file always continue to prop these people up? And that goes back to what Rob is saying. We have to send a different type of person down there, rugged individualist who won't be peer pressured into supporting the cool kids, right? I mean, that's what it basically comes down to. I've been here for 30 years. You need to support me because you're too stupid to know how to do it without me. That's essentially what I mean. I'm pretending that's what they said, but that's what they said, right? Anyway, we're going to we need to send legislators that are not afraid to be the adult in the room. Maybe one of those things to look for in the vetting is the ability to say no. Good point. All right. Well, you can see we're 5 seconds out. There's a thing there. I didn't know if you could see that, but okay. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y things. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. We're continuing now with Robb Myers, senator from the Interior, His latest article is entitled, "Why do so many Republican legislators support higher spending?" And you're saying it may not be a personality thing or a philosophy thing. It may be just the way the system is built. Walk me through this here, Rob. Give me the details here for folks who the too long don't read version at home. They'd rather hear you do the audiobook version. Tell me what we got here.
So basically you go back to, let's say, the 1950s. Okay, we're a territory. We're trying to become a state. If you look at the makeup of Alaska at that point, we're primarily a Democrat area, territory, state. Pick which one. And so if you go back to the Constitutional Convention, if I remember right, we only had 2 Republicans out of those 56 people at that Constitutional Convention that were crafting it. And so we actually ended up with what is generally judged to be the most liberal of any state constitution in the country. The problem that we run into then is the Democrats are more or less, with a couple of exceptions, more or less in charge of this state through the late 80s. Now you start having a little bit of change. Sometimes the Democrats don't feel the good candidate for governor, or sometimes things are bad enough that people are mad at the Democrat Party because they're in charge, and so they sweep in a bunch of Republicans. That happened in 1966. We had the House, the Senate, and the governor all go Republican all at the same time. Please note, the next time that this happened was 1994. But then, the House immediately went back to Democrat in the 68 election. The Senate went back to Democrat a couple of years after that. So it never really stuck. It wasn't we believe in the Republican philosophy of, smaller limited government. It was occasionally we supported the Republicans because we got mad enough at the Democrats. Under the 70s is when our current economic and government fiscal structure got set up. Okay. So, through the 60s, we kind of struggled because the economy is not doing really well. A little bit of more economic related history is coming up in the next article, by the way, next week. I'm still in the middle of writing that one. But what we end up with is, even though it didn't really matter who was in charge, and these coalitions like we've got going on right now are not a new thing. You had these governing coalitions with people crossing the aisle back and forth, going all the way back into the 70s. And from what I've been told, they go all the way back into the 60s, but we just couldn't find good numbers on who exactly crossed the aisle in each year. So we didn't want to say for certain who went which way. But through the 60s, we kind of struggled in our economy and in our government. We barely made the budget balance every year. But then in the 70s, we're rolling in high cotton. The first of the oil money's coming in, first with the lease sales, then in 77 with the completion of the pipeline. And our spending is steadily going up over this decade. And we developed this underlying structure without even really thinking about it. Developed this underlying structure of oil, big multinational companies pull oil out of the ground. They take that oil and they sell it, and the state skims a portion of that off in terms of royalties and severance taxes and things like this. And then the state takes all that money and distributes it throughout the economy through the state budget, the capital budget, the operating budget, what have you. And we call that the economy, in effect, because that's what people pay attention to, because that's the largest, most visible portion of it. That's the part that, makes the news, because that's what we argue about in Juneau, things like that. And so we're creating a structure of take money, centralize it in government, and make economic decisions from there. And we end up with 2 problems with that. Number one is politicians don't make economic decisions. Politicians make political decisions. And so we're not necessarily doing things that are going to build the economy in the long run. And number 2, the part that pertains more to this article is we're not exactly creating a structure that is conducive to smaller, more limited government philosophy. So,
right. Because again, you're centralizing all the money and you're making it a government decision to do it. Well, government's nature is to grow, of course. So it starts to glom onto every dollar that it can to then consolidate it. And then that's where we end up with legislators that consider the government spend to be the entire economy. I mean, they've actually said that to be the entire economy.
Exactly. And so over the course of the 1980s, the Democrats more or less stay in charge of the legislature. But the reality is, that underneath all of that, we're having some changes in the nation. We're having some changes in the state where we're going a little bit further right at the rank and file level. But now the Republicans take over both houses of the legislature in 1992. We officially get a Republican governor in 94 when Wally Hickel, who'd been, elected in 1990, but he switched back from AIP over to the Republican Party again in 94. And we keep a Republican legislature in both houses up through the mid 2000s. But the problem is that it doesn't really matter because we've already created its underlying structure. And so who ends up down here in Juneau? It's people that support the same system. Now, in the 90s, we don't really think there's a problem because oil prices stayed low throughout the 90s. So government really didn't grow because they didn't have the money to grow. And, obviously we'd grown since the 70s, but, that's 20 years of inflation and population growth. And so that kind of masks the problem in effect. So we can be a strong Republican state on a social side, and we made a lot of gains on the social side of conservatism there throughout this state. But we didn't change the underlying fiscal structure, the underlying economic structure. And so the end result is you start seeing some of these cracks a little bit when we start getting a ton of cash coming in about 2006, 2007, as oil prices start to jump up. Our budget jumps up with it. We have the Senate, flips over to a coalition. And then we really start to see the problems in 2015 when oil prices bottom out. And now not only do we not have enough money to go back to what we were doing before 2006, we don't have enough money. Not only do we not have enough money to do what we've been doing for the last few years during that boom time, but we don't have enough money to go back to, what we've been doing in the early 2000s, late 90s either. So, but the problem is that structure is still there. People go, well, I get reelected by spending money. How do I keep this party going? So even though the rank and file has changed, the top level, the attitude there does not change, whether that's inside of the Republican Party or that's inside of the legislature here or in a large part of the populace in general. You and I have been recently talking about how something along the lines of 45% of our workforce is dependent on government spending, direct spending in this state for their jobs. And, when you have that sort of a situation, well, that's 45% that are most likely going to vote for folks that are going to spend money, regardless of the letter at the end of their name.
Right.
So, this is the direction that we're going. And until we change that underlying structure and say, oh, no, we don't want to centralize the money within the government and have them, quote unquote, create the economy through their spending. And we want to actually have a private economy, want to actually decentralize things, then we're going to continue this problem regardless of who's in office, regardless of what party's in charge, anything along those lines. So we've got to fix the underlying structure. Otherwise, the rest of it's just window dressing.
Well, and I think, again, it's important to recognize the fact that in that pivotal moment, that pivotal time when we had the opportunity, because it was that conjunction of events, including the crashing of oil prices and everything else, we had the opportunity for somebody to step up and say, and be the adult in the room and say, guys, this is not balanced. We don't have enough money. We can't draw, $3-4 billion out of the CBR to balance the budget this year and expect it's going to continue. And you make the valid point that those, in fact, Corey asked, during that time, who was the majority in office? The majority in office during that time was Republicans. The smaller, more limited government party people, supposedly, they were the ones that were in charge. Sean Parnell was the one that created the budgets that were based on $115 a barrel oil when oil was down in the mid-70s, right? Low 80s, mid-70s, low 80s. I mean, they had an opportunity and they flubbed it. And why? This is what Rob is looking at. Why? Because they were incentivized not to. Because the goal was not necessarily to make Alaska financially or fiscally stable. The goal was to get reelected. Am I wrong?
The goal was not to fix the problem. The goal was to perpetuate the system, because we've got a system that we already know how it works. We already know that we can get reelected with this system. The very last thing they're going to want to do is to replace that system. You know, we with $20 billion in the CBR and the SBR, you know, we had the money to figure out the off ramp. We didn't take the off ramp. We just found a way to perpetuate the system.
That's 100%. I mean, you just nailed it right there. At that time, we had the ability to create the off ramp. We had we had billions of dollars. We had 16 billion, 17 billion dollars in the CBR. At that point, I think we had over $1 billion in the SBR. At that point, $4 billion in the SBR. Thank you. And so we could have said, oh, guys, okay, we'll take a little money out of these things, but we've got to make a plan. And nobody even suggested it. Nobody even looked at it and said, this might not be smart. I mean, because, look, I'm barely a high school grad. I mean, I'm a Lathrop High School graduate. I barely graduated from Lathrop. But even I can look at it and say, okay, you got $20 billion between these two accounts, and we're going to draw $4 billion out this year. So if we did that every year for the next 4 years, carry the 1, divide by 0. Next thing you know, we're out of money, right? I mean, and nobody bothered to say this might not be a good idea.
Yeah, and to go back to another of our common themes, there's the math problem, there's the political problem. We all knew what the math problem was. That was plain as the nose on our face. But the political problem is, oh, shoot, if I stop spending money, how do I get reelected? And we didn't solve that problem. We didn't solve the problem of, oh, am I actually supposed to care about the private economy? How does the economy work without government spending? If we don't fix that problem either, we're not going to fix the re-election problem. We don't have a system where people want to actually care and make sure that the private economy is thriving. No, we're going to define the economy by what government spends to create an economy, to kind of force an economy to exist.
Right.
And the only reason that they're able to do that is because we have so centralized the money in this state, first with the oil and second with the permanent fund.
Right. It's the prime directive of the system, says Brian, is to protect the system. Right. And he's not wrong. It is a perpetuation. It's a perpetual motion machine, right? It's the perpetuation of what is going on in government. Now, that leads to the bigger question, Rob, which is, okay, and in fact, you say at the end of your article, you say that tells me that the problem is systemic, not personal. We won't get out of this situation until we change the underlying fiscal structure and the incentives that it creates, regardless of which people or party is in charge. So this is not a personal, it's Joe Blow, it's Senator X or Representative Y that's the problem. It is a systemic, baked-in, institutional problem. So the question, how do we fix the system if that's the case? How do we shake things up? How do we break the mold of what's been going on? And that's the deeper question that we're going to get back to with Rob here in just a minute. See how I did that? That's called a hook. You got to come back and hear how that works. All right, we're going to be back in just a moment. Robb Myers is going to answer that burning question. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
And you just said to Joshua's point that you started thinking about this when you read a book called Keynes versus Hayek. Oh man, that sounds like a hell of a read. I mean, I'm going to have to get a copy of that because that sounds like a hell of a read. But Jeffrey makes a point that I think I hadn't thought about. And really, I think Jeffrey wins the internet today on this point. He says, your point is that socialism doesn't work. And he's 100% true. I had never thought about it like that. I know we have kind of the most socialistic constitution in the state, this collective ownership and the kumbaya and everything else. But the problem is, it basically boils down, it's socialism. It's the centralization of the money and the power and everything. It's like the central planning that Russia did, during the Soviet era. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. They think they're smart enough to drive the economy, and that the free market, they don't have to worry about that. They are the market, right? And Jeffrey is 100% right. Your point is socialism doesn't work. And I think that's 100% right, Rob.
No, absolutely. You go back to one of my previous articles, I talk about, one of my very first ones is, why does the state own all the mineral rights? And it goes back to effectively the feds made us. And so, we end up with the state owning Prudhoe Bay and the mineral rights to it. And at first it's like, okay, the state made some money in the 60s off of oil and gas and a couple of other things. But, that was just kind of one part of the whole mix of everything else going on in the state, fishing, gold mining, military activity, things like this. And so it was there, but it wasn't really a big factor. It wasn't an overriding factor until the 70s, when oil then, grew so much that it just paled, everything else paled in comparison. But yes, the problem that we started off with is the largest natural resources in the state were given to the state government, not to the private economy, not to individuals. And that system that we have perpetuated keeps everything together. And so the way we perpetuated the system when oil prices crashed 10 years ago is we said, okay, we don't have a whole lot of money coming off of the oil anymore. Instead, we've got all of this money from the permanent fund. So let's take the same system and switch it over to running off of the permanent fund instead of running off of the Prudhoe Bay oil. And we can perpetuate it. To use Hammond's phrase, we've got we switched wells pumping a finite resource into money wells pumping infinitely, right. Which sounds great until you realize that means that we can now infinitely perpetuate the socialism. That's not exactly a good place to be.
And infinitely grow government. That's the, that's the thing. Infinitely grow, because you have disconnected the size and growth of government from the actual economy, and you've just plugged it straight into the wall. You know what I mean? You're not working on batteries now with a finite charge. You're just plugged it straight into the wall, and away we go.
Right.
I'm sorry. I just Harold, why? Don't be such a dick. Jesus. So, again, what has Rob cooked up during his hours on the road, dragging pipe up the Hall Road? I'm all ears. You know that Thomas Jefferson was a farmer, Harold? He was a farmer. But boy, he did have some other ideas outside of farming. You think that Rob may have a little spare time after driving the truck to maybe think about this stuff, just because he's not you with all the answers? Don't be a dick, man. Seriously. That's just such a small move. Anyway, who has the power, says Corey, to change the system?
Ultimately, it's going to have to be us as the people, because one thing that's, what's happening right now is us as the people are keeping the system in power. And, as much as, might not be the people listening to this show, but it's the people as a whole that are keeping the system in power. And so, that goes back to how we ended the show the last time we were talking is what do we change? How do we get there? Either A, we have to have somebody in the governor's office or something else that, is actually has some vision and is willing to take the steps necessary to alter that system, or B, we crash and everybody just has to face up to that fact. So, what I'm worried about is that as we're still slowly sliding down, we're not going to have a hard enough crash to get us to adjust our mindsets,
Yeah, I mean, I've often, and I've been advocating for the point of view that I don't think it's going to get fixed until it crashes. and it has to crash hard for people to wake up. Like you said, if it's a soft crash and it just becomes a little uncomfortable, but if it's a hard crash, then people are like, what the hell just happened? Right? What do we need to do? And that's that's going to be the main issue there. All right. Robb Myers is our guest. How do we desystemize the system is the question.
I mean,
right? In effect, right. How do we fix this systemic problem? Hopefully Rob's got some ideas here. We're going to come back to it right now. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
All right. Robb Myers is our guest. We're continuing now discussing his new series over at the Alaska Story. And if you haven't read it yet or started to read it, it's a good opportunity. His latest article is entitled, "Why do so many Republican legislators support higher spending?" I mean, smaller, more limited government, right? That was when you wear the elephant on your lapel, when you put the R next to your name, that is supposedly what you're standing for, although in this state, ooh, baby. But the biggest question is, and the summation of Rob's article, the final analysis, he says, and again, I quote, that it tells him that there's a problem, that the problem is systemic. It's not personal. It's not an individual. It's not Senator X or Representative Y. He says, we won't get out of this situation until we change the underlying fiscal structure and the incentives that it creates, regardless of which people or party is in charge. So, Robb, the $1 million question, or in the state of Alaska, the $21,000 per person question is, how do we change the underlying fiscal structure? How do we change the incentives to create something to where we can be adults and realize that we can't spend more than we take in forever and expect it's going to be okay?
So, you mentioned the Alaska disconnect here, where the government doesn't have to care about the economy. And that is one of three disconnects. So ICER came down and gave us a presentation with an update on the 2016 study that Brad was talking about it a couple of days ago. And they just did a webinar for the public yesterday afternoon. You can go to ICER and go watch it again if you're interested, or go through their slideshow. But I was talking to some of those guys afterwards, and I watched their presentation down the hill here. And there's really three disconnects going on. And we got to fix all three of these problems if we're going to actually not only fix our government, but also fix our economy around here. So number one is the one you already brought up, and it's kind of the most obvious one, is the disconnect between the government and the economy. If our economy actually grows, it's actually a bad thing for the government. And so the government is going to take a very jaundiced eye of that and go, do we really want that? Well, we're going to talk about jobs in order to get ourselves reelected, but are we going to actually do things that actually help people get employed, that help people start businesses? Maybe not, unless, and of course, it's, figuring out how to, help people have jobs coming from government money, because then they'll vote for us. So that's problem number one that we have to fix, is the government doesn't get its money from the economy. And the economy then gets hurt by government actions. Number two is we have a disconnect between who is paying for government and who is asking for more spending for government. Because we have an incentive in this state where the government owns, the largest natural resources, but then also owns the largest financial instrument in the state. And so the people have an incentive to call the government and say, I want X to happen. You need to pay for X. And there's very few people that have an incentive to say, I want less spending. I don't want X to be paid for by government, because that doesn't come out of my pocket. So I don't care. And so that's the disconnect, second disconnect between the payers and the spenders. And then the third disconnect is between short-term growth and long-term growth. One thing that came out of that updated ICER study is there's a difference between each of those different revenue options that they laid out. And which ones hurt more in the short term and which ones hurt more in the long term. Because as you probably noticed, a lot of the media coverage came out and said, oh, well, taxing oil and taxing corporations has the smallest effects on employment in the short term. That is correct. But one thing that the economist from ICER clarified for me when I was talking to him later is those have the smallest effects in the short term. They've got the worst effects in the long term. Because what we notice is that when we did any of those other revenue options, that eventually over the course of 25-ish years, eventually the job market comes back. Takes a while, but it does. But when you start taxing, going after the corporations and the oil, according to their models, those jobs never come back. We're permanently depressing the economy some more. So that's not a place that we want to be. The problem is, of course, those are the easiest ones to go after. It's the ones that give you the least political pushback. It gets the ones that give you the least political pushback on spending as well. And so we have this tendency, and we've done this in this state since the 70s. We have this tendency to go after the short-term money, but go after the things that are going to hurt the growth in the long run. And what it's going to take is it's going to take some people, both in the political sphere and in the public, to realize, hey guys, we have these 2-year and 4-year election cycles, and so that makes it hard. But we're going to have to bite the bullet here. We've got a cancer going on, and we're not going to fix that, with a Red Bull. We're going to have to go through the chemotherapy. It's going to hurt. And it's going to hurt for a little while before we actually see the benefits over the long run. So we got to reconnect the government and the economy. We got to reconnect the payers and the spenders. And we have to reconnect the short-term and the long-term benefits. So until we do those things, we're just going to keep going through this same cycle over and over again.
Okay, so 3 disconnects. And you're right. I mean, it's like we've got a femoral artery tear and we keep slapping a Hello Kitty Band-Aid on it instead of actually a tourniquet, right? And some sutures. So that's definitely a problem.
To your point, if we're gonna say, all right, we got a femoral artery tear, you got 2 ways to fix that. Number one, you can go through and you can actually sew it back up. We're refusing to do that. Or number 2, we're just gonna keep trying to find another blood expander to pump in, to refill the system here. And that's effectively what we've been doing is, let's find another pot of money to refill the system, even though we've got that arterial bleed.
Right.
And eventually you run out of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, we're kind of at that desperation point of there ain't no more bloods. There ain't no more bags of O negative to put into the patient. Maybe we should, fix up where the money's flowing out, the outflow. So those 3 things, what is it, what is the mechanism to fix those 3 things then? I mean, how do we connect the economy? How do we connect the payers to the spenders? And, at the end, how do we fix that 2 to 4 year cycle? I mean, is it as simple as term limits? Is it as simple as, adding some kind of tax to where people have to feel it, to pay it, to know what it is? What is it that it's going to take in your mind?
So I don't think we fixed the 2 to 4 year cycle. That's election cycles that, that's what states do all over the place. I don't think that changes. What we have to do is recognize that, just recognize, that when people are going to do the right thing, the effects don't necessarily show up right away. And we have to do the right thing in the long term, not in the short term. But other than that, most of what fixes this is coming out of the Fiscal Policy Working Group. We're talking about a spending cap. So we're going to talk about ending the short-term growth by tying it to long-term growth. Let's connect it back to Senator Kaufman's idea, where you connect the spending to the spending to some sort of economic metric, so that if the economy doesn't grow, the state doesn't get to grow.
Past revenue, et cetera. Right.
Right. Exactly. We have to talk about, where does our money come from? Right now, our money is coming out of Wall Street, and that is perpetuating that disconnect between the government and the economy, and it's perpetuating the disconnect between the payers and the spenders. And, you know, I'm trying to tell everybody out there, it's like, look, taxes are bad, but there are things out there that are worse than taxes. And when you have a government that can grow and you don't have a financial incentive to have people ask for government to stop, that's what's worse than taxes. And so it goes back to Ben asked a question yesterday, said, when did smaller government people become no tax people? And it's like, right. Well, you know, we're in a situation here where people, you know, the average person on the street asks for three things. They want, you know, the same or more spending, they want no taxes, and they want to pull PFD. It's like, well, at best case scenario, you get 2 out of the 3. So pick that. And when we pick the one option of, all right, I'm going to aim for no taxes, effectively what you're saying is I'm going to let government grow. As long as it doesn't affect me, I don't care.
Right.
And
of course, the irony of that, of course, is that they're already being taxed with the taking of their PFD, but they right. just, because they don't ever see the money, they don't feel it.
Right. And going back to, we've made this analogy before at the national level, it's the same thing as when the national government says, oh, well, we want to spend money, but we don't want to tax you. So we're going to borrow money. We're just going to turn on the printing presses, so to speak. And, we're doing the same thing here. We're not doing it by borrowing. We're doing it by getting our money off of Wall Street instead. But that's what we're doing. So at the federal level, we're working to do the same disconnect. But again, it's not that we're not taxing people. We're just hiding the taxes through inflation and making borrowing harder for the private sector, things like that. So right. We're going to hide the taxing. That way we can hide the spending. That way we can get reelected off of spending money in our home districts. So the feds are doing it. We're doing it here. We're just using a slightly different mechanism instead.
It's this is the hard truths that we have to look at. I mean, we're already being taxed, but we're not enjoying the benefit of having the money before we're taxed. So there's another problem as well. We're not utilizing it and then getting a tax bill. And again, the politicians are being rewarded for that behavior because, again, the people want all 3 of those things, and you can only get maybe 2 of the 3, right? And we're going to have to face it. But the Fiscal Policy Working Group did come up with some ideas, and it has to be holistic. And that's again, the big challenge there. Robb Myers has been our guest. It's a great series of articles. Your next one's going to be up next week, Robb?
Yep. I'm aiming for every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. All right. So hopefully the next one will be up next week and we can continue to dissect this stuff. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for spending all that time thinking about it while you're driving your truck. We appreciate you being part of it here. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Hold the line. Thank you for coming on board. All right, folks. Hour 2 dead ahead. All right. I mean, that's the thing. Until we get, and I've been saying, I've been arguing about this with Brad Keithley for a long time, is that without a spending cap, everything else means nothing. I mean, Harold keeps going on in the chat room about how, well, it's only because we've lost because we're giving away our oil. That's the thing.
Except that using the oil money is what got us into this mess in the first place. So if the solution to the problem is just get more money out of oil, that's just giving more alcohol to the drunk.
Exactly. I mean, this again goes back to he says 12% Alaska's being shorted of its rightful take. Fix this and the state will be in okay shape. No, it won't. You could give them 50% of the oil money. And you know what would happen? Government would grow to consume all of that money. That's the problem.
Did that actually fix the problem in 2007, 2008? No, we just shot spending through the roof, and that just made the cliff that much harder for us to fall off. I actually asked Ledge Finance a few weeks ago. I was like, okay, so if ACES was actually still in effect, if we hadn't gone to SB 21, about how much more money would we be getting right now? And they said, well, if we had the same levels of production prices that we have today. And they said, well, it's a little bit hard to say because we've made a couple of other changes along the way as well. But we're estimating something like about $130 million-ish, give or take. And it's like, okay, well, that's money. That's significant. But when you've got a $1.8-ish billion deficit, 1.8 130 million don't get you there. So no, if we just jack the oil prices up, it does not fix the problem.
Yeah, no, because again, the habit of consuming and spending is there.
Right.
No, oil revenue isn't vodka, but it's the point to say they have consumed every dollar in the room and then some. The only reason they were able to,
politically speaking, it is because it encourages us to spend wantonly.
Yeah, exactly. And the bottom line is the only reason that we had all that money in the bank and the CBR and the SBR at the time is because government had so much god awful money that they couldn't realistically spend it all in such a short period of time, and so they needed to do something to and then they've done it, and here we are. This is where we are. Well, Rob, I appreciate you thinking about this, and I appreciate you. Bringing us this intel and your perspective on this. I hope more people are starting to wake up. I don't know if they are or not, but like I said, it may just take a hard crash to that point. That might be where is the thing that wakes us up.
The worst part about it is I think people are waking up, but they're waking up and leaving state. And so that just effectively leaves the rest of us that are still here to fix it. And that's shifting. One thing that we're not thinking about is that's shifting the electorate left, because the folks that are on the right that are realizing that we're in a pickle are taken off, and so it's the folks that are on the left that are left, and helping them to perpetuate the system.
Well, and again, as you said earlier, with 45% of the people in the state now dependent on direct state spending for their jobs and for their businesses, it's gonna get harder and harder, because that doesn't even count the welfare recipients, right? Which are probably pushing up over 50%. So when you already have 50% of the electorate that's voting themselves largesse out of the treasury, that behavior is going to be very, I think at that point, it means it really will have to come down to, you got to crash because there's no more money. And then what are you going to do? Right. That's what it's going to come down to. Anyway. All right. Thank you so much for coming on board. It's Mike, please, you have Rob with you. Please explain to him why the burden of a state income tax is a bad idea. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rob, for coming up. I'm not even going to engage in that. Just thank you for coming on board. Appreciate you being part of it today. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Catch you later, Michael.
All right. Thanks. Robb Myers, our guest. That brings us to Ben Carpenter, the host of Oversight Live, which if you haven't been watching it, it's a great little 1 hour show every day talking about all this stuff, giving us perspective and more. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Audio visual check. Good.
Yeah, you're looking good. Looking good. Feeling good.
Hey, do I have the ability to share my screen to play a 30-second clip of Senate resources?
You might do you have the little plus thing down at the bottom of your screen there on your side? I'd be honest with you, I've never looked. I've never looked from your side of it.
Oh, I do right here. I think.
Present. Yeah.
Slides and PDF video file, share screen. There we go.
Share screen. Yeah. So you can share a screen and it will substitute your screen. It should substitute your screen for whatever you're trying to play there.
Right one here, because I got lots of windows open.
Yeah. You got to choose the right one. Choose your own adventure there.
All right.
All right. We're going to get into it with Ben Carpenter here. And this should be good. If you haven't been following Oversight Live, you can find him over on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@OversightLive. And that's the good way to go over there, subscribe and ring the bell, and you'll get the notifications when he goes live every night. Okay. You're going to keep working on that.
I got it.
You got it. Okay. Look at that. And then I can add it to the stage, and there it is. Go ahead and hit play so we can see if the audio comes through.
Oops, I got to hit it on the other screen.
I think this
okay,
slide,
you got it. Okay, you got it. All right, I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove you, and then we're going to be back to you guys here in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, hour 2 of the Thursday edition of the show. We just finished up with Senator Robb Myers with his latest series of articles over there at the Alaska Story, and I got to tell you, some good stuff. And if you missed it with Rob, you should go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available wherever you find podcasts, or you can just go watch the replay on YouTube or Facebook. One of the two there. Make it crazy. 28,000 views of our shorts and clips of the show here just this last 3 weeks or so. Kind of good to see that more and more Alaskans are getting engaged in that. So if you see them come across your feed, make sure you share them out there with some other folks as well. Hour 2 now. We're being joined by former Representative Ben Carpenter, who is now the host of Oversight Live, which you can find on YouTube. Brian, if you'd link it in the chat room here. It's it's youtube.com/@OversightLive, the @ symbol. So youtube.com/@OversightLive. It's a great show. Starts every evening at 7, and Ben goes through a bunch of different stuff, gives you some behind the scenes ideas, some analysis, some history, and it's a great show. I've had a chance to participate in their chat room and stuff. Some good stuff over there. Let's go over and pick things up with Ben. We're going to talk a little bit about what I'm sure we'll dig into what we were talking about with Rob, as well as the latest on the AKLNG project and the resource committee and everything that's going on. Welcoming to the program, Ben Carpenter from Oversight Live. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing very well. And
thank you.
What a perfect segment beforehand with Senator Myers to talk about systems.
Oh man, I got to tell you, it's a systemic problem. I mean, you and I both know that this is a systemic problem that we've got to find a way to fix it. We know some of the solutions. The question is, can we convince other people to participate in that and get it as well? What's your thoughts so far on the progress of the session and everything else as you look at this? Is anything changing, Ben, or is this going to be more of the same for this session? What do you think?
Well, I think the pipeline is going to consume the bandwidth rather rapidly. That's just my sense of the matter here. I think defined benefits are probably dead on arrival. They might pass a bill, but the governor's going to veto it. And I don't think they've got the votes to override his veto. So that's less of a threat in my mind right now. It's kind of still out there somewhere, but
right.
Dealing with this pipeline, I think, is going to become a major problem. And the reason I talked about it on the show last night, the legislature authorized the process to get this project moving back in 2014. And there's a clip that I wanted to play here to demonstrate why I think this is going to be a bigger issue.
Let me add that up here, and we can get here. This is a clip. Set this up for us.
Senate Resources on the 26th of January, and you've got the full complement of the Senate Resources Committee, including new Senator George Rauscher there on the left, who used to be in the House with me. And they're discussing Senate Bill 138, which I'll explain here in a minute, but I want you to just listen to this 30 seconds of Senator Wielkowski asking a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this slide and what you just testified to really hits on a core question that we as a legislature will need your guidance from. And that is, has this project morphed into something materially different than what was contemplated in Senate Bill 138 back in 2014, such that it needs updated legislative direction? And if so, what would you, as our consultant, recommend?
Okay, so you might be asking yourself, well, it sounds pretty benign.
Right.
What exactly does this mean? What is he asking? So Senate Bill 138 is what authorized this project to move forward in the very beginning. So this is 2014. It was the state's attempt to jumpstart this giant LNG project. And the concept was, instead of just taxing oil companies or oil and gas companies, Alaska would become a co-owner of the gas project. And the state was supposed to make money based on its share of gas in gas, not just in cash. And so that gas in kind would help build the pipeline. It'd help, provide feed for the LNG plant. It'd help provide LNG to export overseas. And then the state's payoff would come later. So Alaska, through 138, created this project where it's betting on longer term profits instead of short term taxes. Okay. So it looks attractive on paper. The legislature's thinking that it has more control over Alaska's gas. There's a potential big upside when LNG prices were strong, and Alaskans get gas along the way because we'd have takeoff from the pipeline in the interior and South Central Alaska. So Alaska's finally taking charge. We're going to get this pipeline done, and the legislature's leading the charge here with this project. But Senate Bill 138 never became a real project. We had a decade of AGDC looking for people to take over this project, and no private company could make the numbers work, right?
Right.
They were being asked to spend tens of billions of dollars. Alaska's, kind of the junior partner here, and there was no guaranteed price. And all of your gas majors, right, your Exxon, your BP, and everybody that was part of the project at the beginning said, we're out. We're leaving. We're not going to do this. We're not going to be able to finance it with our own money, and banks aren't going to be able to finance it. So Senate Bill 138 never reached any sort of financial investment decision because it wasn't financially workable from a private perspective. So what has changed? Now we've got Glenfarne that's come in and owns 75% of the project, but the project that they're moving forward isn't the Senate Bill 138 project. The project that they're proposing or that they're moving forward sells gas at a set price into the system. And then the state gets their take through taxes and royalties up front, and it leaves ownership and risk on the private investors. So that's something that's financeable. It's something that the private industry understands. But under Senate Bill 138, legislators expected the state to have a bigger upside. Like, we'd get more money from this system.
Right,
and so they're looking at the current thing and saying, well, we're going to get screwed. We're not going to get as much money as what the statute says that we should have. We're going to have less revenue. So let's raise taxes so we can get what Senate Bill 138 promised. And that's really what Senator Wielkowski's getting at, who's always interested in raising taxes on the oil industry. So the hard truth that we're really facing here is Senate Bill 138. It was a promise that we're going to commit our state resources to get this pipeline developed, but it didn't deliver anything. The current project, maybe it promises less in long-term revenue to the state, but it might actually deliver gas.
Right.
So now we've got this situation where there's things that don't coexist equally in the environment here. You can't maximize taxes and demand zero risk and still expect private investors to build a mega project in Alaska.
Right.
So,
Because you already had a 14-year track record of trying to do that, and they realized, oh, well, that's just not going to fly. No takers on that flavor of pie.
that's exactly it. Yeah. So the question here with regard to the LNG project is not, can we get more gas revenue? The question is, do we want gas? Because there is no other viable alternative than what's sitting in front of us. So what the legislature's likely, the kind of the things that they've got before them is, do we change the statute to match what we have now and work with what we have now, or do we scuttle the project? If we require the project to meet what Senate Bill 138 had in mind, then you have a very high chance of scuttling the project, because those demands, that structure, that system that you thought you were creating, it's not something private industry can support. So it might scuttle the project. And so this begs the question, are there people, are there entities, are there institutions here, players, who would benefit from scuttling the project? That's a legitimate question that we should be asking ourselves.
Right.
When people are saying, we can't take less in tax. Well, what if we did take less in tax? We'd have gas. Maybe we have to find revenue somewhere else. But if we do take more in tax, we might not have gas. So who benefits that? Who are the players that benefit that?
And what's your hot take on who's going to benefit from that? Who in your mind is the player on that side of the fence?
Well, because we don't have any other options for gas in along the rail belt, at least in South Central Alaska, other than to import it now, it's the company that stands to export LNG, or the companies, the entities that stand to export LNG to Alaska. That's who wins. So it's not NSTAR. NSTAR doesn't actually benefit. The company doesn't benefit from the importation of gas, other than it's selling it to us, and there's a profit built in there through the RCA. But it's NSTAR's parent companies, TriStar, and I forget the others right off the top of my head. I talked about them in the show last night. But NSTAR's parent companies most definitely have a stake in LNG exports coming out of Canada. So NSTAR can plead the fifth and say, hey, look, we're agnostic about this, but it's the ones who own NSTAR in Canada who would benefit if the LNG pipeline didn't get built and we're forced to go to LNG imports from the closest source possible, which would be Canada, down near the Panhandle, right? So,
right, yeah,
right?
Facility, right.
So this begs the question, and I'm not sure where you're going to take a break here, but what's facing the RCA right now? They're having to make a decision. NSTAR wants to socialize the costs of building the export facility. They want to charge ratepayers. This private company wants to be able to charge ratepayers for the export facility through higher rates in the future, right? So
$50 million, right? Yeah, I mean So
your company, your parent companies in Canada want Alaskans to foot the bill for building the export facility while they potentially scuttle the pipeline project so that they can ship gas to Alaska, LNG to Alaska.
It's man, this is a tangled web we weave, man. It's absolutely tangled web we weave. What was, just out of curiosity, we got 1 minute here. What was the response to Wielechowski's answer? Did they come back and say, oh, well, we need to address the taxation issue in the room, or what was the thing?
In less words, yes. That the current project as it stands is outside the authority of Senate Bill 138. And the legislature may have to do something to bring it back in or figure out what it needs. So that's really what the demand is going to be in the legislature is, do we want gas through the pipeline, and do we believe that it's possible, meaning there's a viable project at play here, or are we going to go a different route and say, you know what, we don't believe the pipeline's going to actually get built and we'd rather go this other route?
Man. And of course, we still don't have final investment decision. We still don't have a final price tag, right? That's still, nobody's saying anything right now. We're not hearing a word about it. So how can we even make a decision when we don't even know where the price tag on the thing is going to sit.
Well, there's a lot of action that's being taken by Glenfarne to get to that final investment decision. I mean, they put orders out, and I know that these are orders that are maybe contingent upon FID, but orders for the ships to get built that would be needed for hauling the LNG to Asia. Orders for steel to build the pipeline. I mean, those things are going out, and those are legitimate requests of companies to start planning for the construction of these things, right? So that's not a insignificant arrangement that's being made right now. Okay. But maybe one of the things that's in the hurdle of FID is, what is the legislature going to do about the statutory authority and the tax piece of this? What are they going to do? In Canada had to drop the taxes in order to get their export facility at Kitimat. They had to take an appetite suppressant on what they wanted in order to get a project built. And Alaska's facing the exact same thing. So if our legislators aren't going to take an appetite suppressant, they're going to demand 138 level of revenue, Senate Bill 138 level of revenue, it may scuttle the project.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're going to continue here in just a moment. We'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with this in just a moment. Back with more right after this.
Tune in Friday for our weekend entertainment and movie streaming review with our guest critic, Willie Waffle. That's actually his real name. Really? That's his real name? Man, his parents must have hated him. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Ben Carpenter is our guest. This actually leads me to another connective question, Ben, because then we go back to this disconnect between the private economy and the government economy that we're experiencing on the revenue issues in the state. And when you look at this issue, the 138 issue, through the lens of that, you realize they may scuttle the project just to get at the rare opportunity or the chance that they may get that revenue. And to hell with what the people need or what the people want or this cheap, affordable energy, because that's not what's important. What's important is maximizing the revenue to the government. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. And just extrapolate out, if you had $100 billion permanent fund, you'd have $5 billion in a 5% market value drawdown to spend on government. And that's the goal of many, right? So then why would you need the revenue from the pipeline? I mean, theoretically, you've got enough money coming off the permanent fund earnings. Now, I don't buy for a minute that if you just have this theoretical argument, this is if we didn't have the permanent fund dividend, if that was never in existence and all of the revenue was being spent by state government on state budgets, operating and capital budgets, we'd be having a conversation about additional taxation right now because they would have spent everything that they have available to us, to them, right? So maybe there would be pressure to build a pipeline if they thought that it was going to generate revenue for the state. The question is, do they want more revenue or less revenue? And the theory here is, well, we don't trust oil companies. We don't trust the gas companies. We don't trust the private sector. So we want to maximize the state take on this. And then the players say, you know what, this isn't possible for us, and we're going to walk away. And the end, maybe scuttling the project isn't the goal, but it ends up being what happens because of ignorance. I don't know. I'm at risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist here, but
right.
But I'm looking at, Wielkowski's Democrat. Democrat Party says, hey, they passed their own resolution that says, Biden, please help us end the oil and gas industry in Alaska. Go to the Alaska Democrats website, look at their resolutions, and that's there. Like, their goal is to end oil development in Alaska. So why would they not want additional taxation, which would just help drive oil and gas out of Alaska?
Right.
And there's another thought on this too. The structures and systems that we put in place. Sorry, I'm on a roll. Did you want to say something on your show, Michael?
No. I mean, I think you're 100% right. I mean, you end up sounding maybe a little bit like a conspiracy theorist, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a conspiracy. That doesn't mean that there isn't underlying goals that they may be working towards. And removing the oil and gas industry from Alaska is one of the stated goals of the Democrats. It's what they want. Again, with no idea of how the state functions or how we make money or how the industry works. Or, I mean, just think about it. If you cut the entire industry out of Alaska, what would that leave, right? What would that leave for us?
There's another factor here that's way behind the scenes, and that is that Glenfarne was not the only group that wanted to run with the project. There was a union-based group that wanted to be Glenfarne, like they wanted to take over the project, and AGDC went with Glenfarne instead of the union. So I don't know, are politicians that are in the union's pockets vying for a way to push Glenfarne out of the process, and then the union project gets taken over? I mean, that's a really big conspiracy, right? But I mean, this is the state of Alaska, and the unions control state government. So
right,
what's possible?
Is it that far-fetched? Is it that far-fetched an idea? No. You can see here we got about 45 seconds here. So
I see that. Yeah, that clock is very handy for me, Michael, by the way.
Okay, good. Final thought before we jump back into it.
Yeah, I think there's to tap into what Senator Myers was talking about with systems. There's a nexus here with the system that the state has set up with utilities, the RCA, and where we are at right now with low quantities of natural gas in South Central Alaska is a byproduct of that regulatory authority and a aversion to a market-driven economy. So
right.
That bears a little bit more discussion, maybe.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're going to continue with him here, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Here we go, my friends.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're continuing now with Ben Carpenter, our guest. And I hate to repeat because we just went over this, but again, it makes me think, Ben, with the disconnect between the private and the public economy at government, right, in the government level right now, where they really don't care about what happens in the private economy. There is a chance that people in the legislature could be pushing to try and enact SB 138 type controls on the new pipeline, on the very off chance, the slim off chance that they actually make more money. And again, to hell with what it does to the citizens or the private economy, whether or not we get cheap, affordable gas or not, because to them, that doesn't matter. What matters is maximizing the revenue to government.
That I think there is risk at that. I think that is a risk. I don't have a sense of how great that risk is, meaning numbers of votes in the legislature. But I think there certainly are people who would be fully interested in supporting Glenfarne stepping out and a new solution coming forward. I 100% agree with that.
So where does this leave us right now? And the answer back, by the way, to Wilikowski's question in the Senate committee was, that the current program or the current project falls outside the scope of that bill from 2014, and that if they wanted to do something, they'd have to create new legislation. So where does it go from here in your mind, Ben, as you watch this? You know the players. What is your thoughts here?
Well, I think that's why this consumes, both from a timing perspective. We've got a expectation of FID that is probably heavily tied to what the state's going to do with regard to taxation. That has to happen. I mean, we're expecting, we wanted an FID already, and the Glenfarne said, hey, we're going to have an FID already, but now it's February and no FID. I suspect that some of that from the private perspective is we know the Alaska legislature is not really a trustworthy partner. What are they going to do? And if they head the SB 138 route, well, this may not be workable for us. So I think the legislature is going to have to ask itself, do we want gas? If the answer is yes, the only project that you have, the only plan going forward is the current one with Glenfarne. You don't have an alternative right now. There isn't one. So if you take steps that are going to disincentivize Glenfarne and the partners that they have created to continuing the project as it's been planned and has reached agreement across a broad range of players, if you're going to jeopardize that with higher taxes, then you are taking risk that you're going to scuttle the project. So who benefits when you scuttle the project? That's, I think, the ultimate question that people need to be asking. What are the ulterior motives? Who's got the bias in the legislature for scuttling the project?
And your answer to that is, one, there's connectivity tissue here between NSTAR and its parent companies, who are net exporters of gas out of Canada. Right. And two, there is a potential for, there was a second player before Glenfarne got chosen, and they were a union organization that wanted to get to it. They didn't get picked. So maybe Glenfarne gets kicked to the curb and they find some way to insert their union-based organization into the project. And they, of course, will find a way to make it work. That's your contention here.
I think that may be what's at play. Call me a conspiracy theorist. I'd be glad. I'll be very happy to be wrong. Yeah. I'm very happy to be wrong. If I'm the conspiracy theorist and I'm making much ado about nothing, then so be it. But if I'm not wrong,
right,
then let's have all the cards on the table and let's have a conversation. I mean, obviously the legislature needs to know what the financials are of the project to make good decisions, right? So I'm all in favor of that conversation happening at the right levels.
That's the chicken and egg problem that we have right now, right? Because Glenfarne said, oh, we'll have the FID, which is the final investment decision, the price tag of the pipeline. Oh, we'll have that out in late December. And, first it was going to be earlier in the year, September, I think, and then it became late December. And here we are in February, and we still don't have it. And you're saying they're waiting to do it before they see what the legislature is. But the legislature's kind of got to know what the final price is before they make this. I mean, who's going to blink in this? This is like a game of chicken. We're not going to tell you how much it costs until you tell us what you're going to give us, or we're not going to give it to you until you tell us what it costs.
Yeah. Well, I would just use an example of my time in the legislature as a appointed member to the AGDC board. I signed a non-disclosure agreement in order to participate in conversations behind closed doors with the project, right? I didn't see that as a problem because I don't want to scuttle the project, but I do want some kind of oversight. The people in my district would like me to have some oversight. So I signed that non-disclosure. That was open to any legislator who wanted to participate and wanted to know what was going on, but not disclose private information that might hurt the project. Okay. Very few legislators took, to my understanding, very few legislators actually took the corporation up. I'm talking AGDC up on that offer. So is it laziness? Is it lack of foresight? Lack of caring? I don't know. I don't know what it is. Lack of belief. Maybe some were just anti-AGDC and didn't want to participate. I don't know. But I do know that there were only a handful of people that actually, maybe even on one hand, people that signed non-disclosures and actually were privy to more detailed information. Obviously stuff they couldn't share with the public and make part of the legislature. But anyway, the point is, there is a path forward for information that the legislature needs to be shared. Senate Resources meeting on the 26th talked about this. The contractor that Senate Resources has paid has done this before, where they're the kind of the middleman, where they present information to the legislature in a fashion that the legislature gets a warm fuzzy that this is what the financials are. So there's a path forward to get the information that they need. The question is, do the appropriate people in charge in Juneau want the project to go forward? If they don't want it to go forward, then they will find reasons, justifiable reasons, why this project can't happen. It is not feasible. It is whatever excuse they bring.
Right.
You got to look a little deeper here.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to put your ask you to put your turban on and hand you the crystal ball and give me Vegas odds. What do you think is going to happen here, Ben? As you look at this, you look at the players, you look at the questions they're asking, you see the public stuff. You do have some behind the scenes knowledge in part of this, so you have a little bit of a better handle on it than the average Joe. What do you think is going to happen this session with the gas line stuff? Where do you think it goes from here?
Well, I'm going to stake my reputation here right now on the hope that there are more legislators that want to see the pipeline happen and will accept a lesser non-138, non-Senate Bill 138 structure. And that's the direction the legislature goes. I think at the end of the day, those numbers will carry greater weight than scuttling the project, if that's the decision that they are faced with. I hope that that's the case. And this, I mean, you've got a point. This whole thing points back somewhat to the systems that we've put in place with the RCA, right? We're literally looking at a decision to scuttle a project that would provide natural gas to us because we can't find natural gas in Cook Inlet because it's too expensive. What we perceive to be too expensive for decades. And the RCA is there to protect us from being gouged by gas companies who say it's too expensive to go get gas. We need to raise the price of gas. Okay. Now we're faced with, if you scuttle the project, we're faced with high price of gas, but it's imported. We would be supporting gas producers in Canada, not in Alaska. So either way, Alaskans are going to end up paying higher price gas if we don't have a pipeline. The RCA, the structure that says we need to have a monopoly and we need government to control the prices, is part of the problem. Alaskans demand low-cost energy through government regulation, not willing to pay whatever market price will sustain gas production. So now we're faced with a regulatory authority, a regime that caused gas producers to leave South Central Alaska. And now we're short-sighted. Now we got to import gas. I mean, it's right. It's mind-boggling, the systems that we've set up in this state that are counterproductive to economic activity.
I feel like I've been saying this for a while now, but I feel like, I have hope that the project is going to move forward, but I don't necessarily have optimism that the project is going to move forward. That's kind of the conundrum that I'm in right now. I'd like to think that the legislators that are out there would put the people first in this regard and look at a lower take in the short term and maybe even down the road because of the knock-on benefits to Alaskans. And that could be everything from just having cheap, affordable energy to, again, add-on industries or other things that could be done down the road.
Yeah, I think, and I see Bruce's comments in the chat. I think that the good bet is that constituents back home, and for people who want to get reelected, they do not want to go back and answer for why they voted to do something that ended up scuttling the project. I think that's probably going to be the stronger play for those in power. We want to get reelected, and thus we're going to take a lesser tax and oil regime. We're going to create that so that we get a pipeline. I think that those numbers are going to play out in greater numbers than others that might have ulterior motives.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. He is the host of the show Oversight Live. If you haven't had a chance to go watch it, you can find it on YouTube, youtube.com/@OversightLive. If you want to get a feel for what Ben is doing on a weeknight basis, you can go over there every night, and he spends an hour. It's not a whole lot of time, just an hour every night going over everything. And you can check it out over there again on YouTube. We're going to continue with Ben Carpenter in just a moment. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. Also on YouTube as well, if you want to go over there. And of course, you can always pick it up on the podcast later on. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Ben Carpenter's our guest here. Bruce has made a couple comments. His latest one, bingo, and the state will receive nearly nothing as far as the revenue stream goes, but boy, will they start spending more on the budget as if we are flush with new money. And again, that's the problem. I mean, going back to what Harold said earlier, and a lot of people have said, oh, if only we had gotten more money out of the oil companies, we would have spent every dollar of it. Because again, there's nothing in place to hold back that appetite. They have nothing but an appetite for spending. We could have taken another 20% from the oil companies for royalties and revenues and everything else, and we would have spent every dollar of it. Just because there's nothing in place to hold back that spending. Ben,
I reviewed a document produced by Legislative Finance that identified new revenues, and this is based on permanent fund earnings and oil and the price of oil, right? So the new revenue for this budget, or the projected revenue for this budget, was up for the price of oil, but it was based on fall forecast, so it's actually probably down or neutral. But the interesting thing is there is $200 million more in permanent fund earnings to spend in this next fiscal year than there was in the last fiscal year. And then you turn to the day one press conference with Senator Hoffman as the Senate Capital Budget co-chair.
Right.
And Senator Stedman as I got that backwards. Senator Hoffman is the operating budget co-chair, and Senator Stedman is the capital budget co-chair. And right off the bat, Senator Stedman identifies that he thinks about $200 million shy in the governor's budget. I mean, we need to add about $200 million to the governor's budget. Okay. Right. So that just means $200 million more at the same time as Legislative Finance is saying, hey, we got $200 million more. I mean, you can't make it up. Like, this is exactly what happens is we just spend everything that's available to us as a legislature. And that's why the dividend goes away. That's why it goes away. If you find value in having the legislature not having access to all of the permanent fund earnings, if you find value in that, that's in essence why the permanent fund dividend program was created. It was to limit the amount of money that the state legislature had available to it, because we recognized they would spend it all. If you find value in that kind of a spending limit, then we must demand that we continue a permanent fund dividend program, or the government will consume it all. And if you're saying, I don't want to pay taxes, then you're literally saying, I want government growth at the speed of the permanent fund, and I don't care whether we have large government, just don't tax me.
Right. Well, and again, and I think that's the problem is that's not even a truism there, because the problem is that it's not a question of, do you want a PFD or a tax, or the bottom line is you'll have no PFD and a tax, because again, they can't control their appetite for spending. So it will consume. There's only $660 million. That's what the PFD cost last year as far as paying it out to people. I mean, that's the thing, $660 million. We're already upside down. We've got a $500 million supplemental budget. $432 million plus the new $70 million that the governor just went in there. $500 million supplemental budget for this year, not next year, this year. Where do you think that the money's going to come from? There's only $660 million in paying your PFD at $1,000.
And this is the other thing that we probably don't have time to have this conversation in depth, but House Finance Committee took up salary study and job classification conversation. And back when I was in the legislature, when Republicans were in control, we paid for $1 million for a salary study that should have been done many, many years ago. And the salary study comes back and says, basically, your classification, and this is the contractor that we paid to do this. They said your classification process is part of the problem. You need to look at your classification system. So they hired a new pay division director. She's been on the job since November. And she says the third day on the job, she started asking for more information about this classification problem. And the questions in House Finance say, how long is it going to take before we have some resolution on this issue? And she goes, oh, it's probably another year. So after the gubernatorial election, a new governor comes in. Who knows who that's going to be, whether they have a priority to fix the classification problem and the pay problems that we have. And this is all leading to the vacancy issue that we have. We've been highlighting this from the administration, and we've got a vacancy problem. We want to throw defined benefits on this vacancy problem and say we can't hire, we can't retain or recruit people because we don't have a defined benefits pension. Well, what we have is a job classification and pay problem that's the foundation. It's causing the state to have to pay more in overtime, and those overtime dollars are jacking up the current pension system that we have. That's why it was somewhere north of $6 billion in debt when I came into the legislature, and Stedman just said it's $8 billion now. So this
right. We gotta go.
I see the timer.
We gotta go. Back with more of the Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Dukes Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right. Finishing up one final segment here with Ben Carpenter, who's the host of Oversight Live. If you haven't had a chance to go out and watch it, you should. It's on YouTube. You can find it at youtube.com/@OversightLive. Just go over there and take a look at it and make sure you sign up and do all that stuff because he comes on every evening to discuss these things in a 1-hour segment that is pretty concise and it's getting some real traction, and I love to see that. Ben was just talking about the size and scope of government, and he was talking about the employees and everything else and the defined benefits. And I mean, and we still got the question about whether or not they're even going to bring up that's probably going to be next year's fight, the funding, right, of the education system, because the education funding task force is not going to give its recommendations until next year. So they may be smart enough to put this off until next year. But the problem is, again, that's one more thing that wants to draw more money into the system. And as we just pointed out during the break, there is no more money. I mean, the PFD at $1,000 costs $660 million, essentially, for the whole state. $660 million at $1,000 a person. But the supplemental budget for this coming year, Ben, we just got the number. Delana Johnson dropped the number in the chat room yesterday or day before, $432 million. But the governor just added another $70 million. So it's a $500,000 supplemental, which is this year, not for next year, this year. I mean, where does it end?
It ends in your wallet. That's where it ends. When they have to come to you and take money out of your wallet, then people get upset. And it's not just the limited number of people. It's people who can actually influence and who are influencing things. Like, I don't know how else to say it. There are not enough people who care that our government is growing out of control. And it's not just the state government, it's the federal government as well. We're so comfortable having government take care of us that we are missing the boat on responsibility and responsible government. When the last legislature that I was in, I identified $300 million that was being appropriated for vacant positions in the state government. Some of those were legitimate because there's normal churn, but many of them were not. Many of the vacant positions were not being advertised on the jobs website for Alaska state workers. Okay. So there's an intentionality here of not hiring, not even attempting to hire for some vacant positions because that money is being used. It isn't left over at the end of the year. We don't lapse it into the general fund at the end of the year. There's a deficit or a supplemental budget because we don't have enough money, right? It is being spent, and I think it's being spent on overtime. And this is anyway. We've got a classification problem. It's a systems problem, as Senator Myers was talking about, a job classification problem, a pay problem that needs to be resolved. We paid for the study in 2023. Okay. So the bureaucrats, and I don't want to blame the lady who is, speaking in House Finance, because she's only been on the job 3 months, and she's not a state of Alaska worker for very long. She retired out of the federal government, is now working for the state. Poor her. Like, she walked into a buzzsaw. The reality is, somebody says in the legislature, we need to fix this problem. We recognize it. Let's shine some light on it by putting a study together. And 4 years later, after a new governor, we might be able to address it. There's no will to address it. Like, there's got to be a reason why there are people probably benefiting from the system, and that's why it never gets addressed. And if you point to the overtime being paid and it propping up pension, what you're going to get in your pension, then why would people be incentivized to fix it? If I get to put 10 hours a week in overtime towards my pension, why would I not do that for the next 5-10 years?
Right. If your pension is based on your top earning years and you're getting overtime every week, and the money for the vacant positions is being used to fund that overtime, let me help out Johnny here. Johnny's about to retire in 2 years. So let me give Johnny a bunch of overtime. I'll pay for it with these vacant positions. Now Johnny's going to get a much higher retirement pension. Of course, I mean, there is no incentive to stop that. And this goes back to what Rob was saying. It's systemic. Everybody is dependent on the government at that point, and there is no incentive to vote it out any other way.
So you've got a choice in November about a governor, and the next governor has got to be a systems thinker. We have got to send somebody down there that is willing to be a one-term governor and is thinking about systems, not pandering to, what you want to hear to get them elected. You got to discern whether that person's a systems thinker and is willing to only be there for one term or less, if that's what happens. There are things that have to be fixed in our state government systems that have to be broken and fixed. They're already broken, but you got to destroy them. You got to redo them into something that's better, and that's going to cause pain, and people are going to complain. But the right thing to do is fix it. It's not going to be popular.
Right. Well, and I would say, although the fiscal policy working group called for a holistic approach, meaning you had to take on everything at once, the bottom line is, even if you only had to put one thing in there, Ben, I would choose that it's a spending cap, with teeth, constitutional, making sense spending cap, because at least that would start the ball rolling. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong, but it's a constitutional spending cap, and I think you have to tie it to the private sector. So whatever the size of the state GDP minus government GDP that's added into that, usually, if you remove the government GDP and government spending out of it, whatever the size of when the size of the private economy grows, then the state can spend more. If that was in place, then the legislature would be looking every year at what the size of the private economy is. And then it would care. It would want to do things that would incentivize that growth because their pet projects would have more money.
Right. It would incentivize them because then they'd have more money to spend. As it is right now, they don't give two craps about what happens in the private economy because all their money's coming out of the stock market and the oil industries.
But that system doesn't work, though, unless you have a connection from the private economy to spending in state government. And this is why a spending limit and a statewide low broad-based sales tax makes sense, because your broad economy helps pay for your state government, and your state government doesn't grow faster than the growth that's constitutionally protected in that spending limit. There's a cycle, there's a system that you're establishing in order to make that happen. The permanent fund earnings, they don't go to the government. That half of it goes to the government, half of it goes to the people and to the private economy, so you can grow the economy.
Right. And again, those people never realize, and we're being taxed right now with the taking of the PFD. The problem is the money never hits our bank account. We never get to utilize it and then pay the taxes on the money that we've made or earned or anything else. It never goes into the private economy. And I think you got a brilliant example there in the spending limit of taking the GDP and taking the government spend out of it. because that's the thing. A lot of these people, they just believe that the government spend is the economy. And if they want to increase a spending cap, well, all they got to do is spend more money in the government side, and it pumps it up, right? Then they can justify the increases. It's got to be tied to the private economy.
Agreed. And it's not just a tie as in a spending limit and let the legislature figure it out. It is a systems problem. Create the system to get the output or the consequences, the byproduct that you want. A spending limit tied to a broad-based tax ties your limit to your revenue. Without the broad-based tax, you don't have a tie. Like, how would the government get money from the private economy when it grows? They don't. That's the problem. So they're always going to go to the dividend because it's the only source. We've got a broken system. You're incentivizing the wrong thing, and it's all for tax avoidance.
Right.
Tax avoidance in the state, and then our federal debt going up and inflation going up because of our monetary policy. That's all tax avoidance at the federal level.
Yep. And the problem is, of course, is the dividend is finite. Once it's gone, then they're going to come to you. They're going to come to you and say, well, it's time you paid your fair share.
That's exactly it. There will be essential services that are too important to lose. Yeah.
Brad, excuse me, Ben Carpenter. We got about just over 2 minutes here. Final thoughts for the show today, Ben. Where are you at here? Give me the rundown.
I'm going to have to sit on this couch and decompress in a minute because I really feel like I talked myself out. No, yeah. I just think that the legislature needs to have some long-term thinkers, and I'm not sure that you do right now.
Well, I mean, I think that's obvious. I mean, again, even with the comment from Stedman last year where, we know bad times are coming, but we don't want the public to dwell on that. We've got this. How is it that you've got this? You were the guys that were in office and in charge when this all went down. How are you, I mean, I crashed the car, but don't worry, I can drive you to the hospital. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
It's so funny. It's so ironic. Day one press conference, Senator Stevens, Senate president, identifies that he's got more than 90 years of experience in Senate finance with Senator Hoffman and Senator Stevens or Stedman. And he doesn't count himself, but Stevens, he's a fixture. He's been there forever. Those guys have had their hands in the decisions that have been going on for decades. Like, where we are now is because of their priorities.
Right. But don't worry
for where we are right now.
Don't pay attention to that because we've got it covered. You guys shouldn't dwell on. Of course, they don't want people to dwell on it because people might get upset. And when they understand what's coming, because what's coming is taxation in one form or another. And if we don't have a say in it, we're going to get the worst form of tax. Ben, quickly.
Spending is taxation.
Yeah, spending is taxation, 100%. All right, Ben Carpenter, Oversight Live, youtube.com/@OversightLive if you want to subscribe. He'll be on tonight at 7. Ben, thanks for coming on board. Got a little wound up today, man. You're going to have to go. You have to take a tranquilizer and a cup of coffee when we're done. Thank you for coming on board. Appreciate you, my friend. Hold the line. Folks, we got more coming up tomorrow. It's Firearms Friday, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. Ben's like, he's got to just feel like you got your exercise for today, huh? It's a lot of good stuff tied up in that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's equal parts of me that are like, why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep banging your head against the wall?
Oh, man.
The others are like, somebody has to say it. Bang your head. Somebody has to bang your head against the wall.
Dude, 25 years of this. The same arguments for 25 years. That's what I've been doing on this program, arguing the same things, talking about the same things. I mean, it feels really good to be able to say, I told you so a lot of the times, but it doesn't help anything. Like, I told you this was going to happen, but did you listen? No. I mean, I'm just a radio guy, but even I could see this. I'm barely a high school graduate. Even I could see the problems with the arithmetic that you guys are using. But don't worry. Don't pay attention to that. I mean, whatever you do, we've got this completely covered. Don't worry about it.
Senator Stedman. Well, the Senate president listed off of a series of headwinds that we're facing. And I just don't want the public to dwell too much into that arena. We see them coming. We're going to try to deal with them.
I just don't want the public to dwell too much. We see it come. We've got it. Don't worry. We know exactly what we're dealing with. Don't worry about it. I mean, come on, Ben. This is the thing. How in the world, if they didn't have the foresight to see this coming when everybody else was outside screaming at them, how are they going to fix this?
Senator Stevens started this press conference on day one, and he said something to the effect of the state services that we bestow on Alaskans, that we give Alaskans. And I think that really goes into the mentality of the leadership. They really do see that they are bestowing services on Alaska. It is my role as senior elder in this community to give you all state services, and you need to thank me for what you do. It's
great. It's great. Uh-oh. Harold just said, no wonder, that explains everything. You only have a high school diploma. Well, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, neither one of them, they all just had high school diplomas too. So maybe I'm in good company rather than the other half. All right, Ben, any final thoughts here before I let you go?
I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope all your listeners have a wonderful day. Don't let the challenges in life get you down.
No, absolutely. You can't do it. And again, don't grow weary in well doing. Like Ben says, you got to smash your head a little bit to get it to get it going. And you can't stop. Don't stop, never stopping is what I'm saying. All right, Ben Carpenter, thank you so much, my friend. We'll see you tonight. Thanks for coming on board and being part of it with us.
All right, see you, Michael. Have a good day.
All right, folks. Ben Carpenter, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. We're out of time. I guess we're running the clock today. We're ready to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. We appreciate you guys, and we will see you mañana. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to go check out those YouTube shorts we're putting up every day or so. Go check those out and share those little tidbits and nuggets out with your friends. All right, my friends, we will see you tomorrow.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.